Are we on go?
Yes.
Okay. Something that I wanted to talk about tonight on today's webinar is a topic that I've gotten a lot of questions over, and it's usually really pretty popular. And it's really looking at just different horse show trends and fads, and taking some of these things from a judge's point of view. Because to me, it's really, you can be a great showman, but sometimes what you think that a judge thinks of some things may or may not be how they look at some of the things, or and as a show person, you might see some of the trends that are out there and wonder, is that something that's a big deal that I should copy? Maybe you should, and maybe you shouldn't. Okay, so the first thing that I always go back to is make sure that you know the rules for whatever show you're attending, for whatever kind of horse show that you might be going to, be it a 4-H show, be it a breed show, open show, and that, because things do change. Don't think that some of the rules never do, because we do update them and so it's really important that you stay up to snuff with what some of the different kind of rules might be for whatever show it might be that you're potentially attending. Kind of what I want to start talking about first is some of the grooming things. And I've got a couple different pictures here of the same individual on the same horse, and you can see really how they are kind of turned out and groomed and put together a little bit different. Now, you can kind of think about what your level of expectation might be when you're getting ready to go to a horse show, and a little bit what the level of competition might be. This individual is turned out in attire and stuff to be showing at a Nebraska State 4-H horse show. But you can see the two presentations are quite a bit different, where one, she's got kind of more of a work saddle on, kind of a lighter colored jean, and these may at the state level not even be legal. To me, your jeans are a little bit short, so just kind of a little bit rougher kind of turnout over here on this side. When we come over here to the picture of the same individual on the same horse with the light blue pad on, you can see that how much the turnout is quite a bit different. Yes, she's got a saddle here with a little bit of silver on. Her shirt is fitting a little bit snappier. She's got a bit of a tie on that kind of acclimates or complements the color of her pad. The jeans are the dark color that's preferred for 4-H, and also, the jeans are longer and more of the appropriate length. Now, it doesn't say you have to have the silver on your saddle and those types of things, but I think you can see that if you were to be going to a state competition, that the turnout with the blue pad just looks a little bit sharper, a little bit nicer than over on the other with the red pad. There's some things you could sure change, but I'd say if I was going to kind of an open show using it as a warm-up or a practice, this kind of turnout might be just fine. But if I wanted to be real serious at a higher level, say even going into the State 4-H horse show, I try to dress up both myself and my horse just a little bit more, just kind of staying in the confines of what the rules for our State 4-H horse show, our 4-H dress code and stuff is. Okay, you get a lot of questions over the horse's manes, and a trend now, and I don't think it's going to go away, is if you should band or not to band a horse's mane. And again, sometimes to me that goes a little bit of the level of horse show that you're going to, the type of show that you're going to, and what you hope your outcome to be. This again is the same horse. The top picture is she's just at home. Her mane is short, but it's not banded. And this is taking the same horse to the county fair. And you can see we've gone in and banded her mane to give her just a little bit more, for a showmanship class, just a little bit sharper presentation. Now, there's no rules that say that you have to band or don't. Those are personal preferences. But trust me, if you're going into a halter class, a showmanship class, particularly where grooming is a factor, most judges will take you a little bit more serious if you do have the mane put together, like if it's banded, shortened, and those types of things. Back to the length of the mane, it doesn't have to be short, and I've seen some very nice manes banded or put down that are on a rope horse or an Arab or a horse that does have a longer mane. So those are going to be, the length of the mane is partially your personal preference. It will go along with whatever discipline you might be competing in. To some degree the breed, because some of our breeds, such as our Morgans or Arabians and some of those horses, do have a longer mane, and also again the level of show. I'll be perfectly honest with you, if I go over to an open show and I'm mainly using it as a practice deal, I might not band my horse's mane, especially if it's one that's nice like this Palomino mare's is that lays over really well. But it just kind of depends on what we might be doing. Here's some other things about as far as some grooming and some of the manes. This is a young man at State 4-H, and his mane is long. It lays over really well. It's very nice the way it's presented. This is another rider showing in horsemanship, I believe it is, with a long mane that has been banded, and it just gives a little bit sharper presentation. So neither one is right or wrong, but it's a little bit up to you if you're going to do that. And I would say that if you are going to band a mane, make sure that you have learned how to do it so it does look very nice and neat like this, and it's not kind of really ratted and standing up and those types of things, because that can be as much of a deterrent as if you have it, you know, banded or not banded. Now, the other one that people think about is if they've got this horse that they're showing in English, and if they should braid it or band it, okay? And to me, that's the same type of thing. It depends a little bit on the level of the type of show you're going to, the level of competition. This is the braided mane for an English horse. Some people will show their English horses with a banded mane, as we do our Western horses. If I was to compete at a, say, a breed show and just doing the hunt seat, then I think you really do need to have it banded, or excuse me, have it braided. If you're at the State 4-H horse show and you make the finals, I think you'd present just a little bit sharper presentation if it is braided. But braiding is difficult. You want to make sure you can do it good and correctly. And so, again, you want it to come out and be as sharp and as neat as what you can do. And so you have to kind of make some decisions. The other issue with the English bit is, you know, if you're at type of an open show or a multiple day deal, that you might be showing both English and Western on that same horse. And so those are some thoughts and decisions that you might have to make as far as what you should do. Now, the issue with the tails. Most associations do allow you to use an artificial tail, provided it's put in correctly with a hair-to-hair attachment, so that you do have a long tail on your horse. There's nothing that says that you have to. There are some classes that it is not allowed in. In most groups, you're not allowed to put a tail, additional tail, if you're showing ranch riding, versatility ranch, and some things like that. So again, you need to make sure you know the rules for whatever you're showing in, if it's allowed or if it's not. Okay. And so this is a horse that has had, you know, some issues with this tail, and it's a little bit shorter than what a person like to see. This one probably has some tail added to it. The best jobs of putting a tail in is that you can't tell if he's had extra tail put in or not. Here's some other pictures of some horses waiting out there for showmanship, and you can see that the horse on the one side here does have some tail added to it, and it gives a very nice appearance. There's nothing wrong with showing this horse. It doesn't have some added tail. Sometimes it just, you know, some folks say that they feel that they have a little bit better presentation or look to them, particularly because grooming is a factor of your showmanship class. As a judge, I'm not going to grade you up or down if you've got an extra tail in your horse or not. I'm really going to be looking at the overall presentation, the overall turnout, and those types of things. But it does go with the overall look of your whole presentation that you're putting out there. So to show you some differences, these are some horses that we did a bit where we had some that we didn't have the natural horse before we put a tail in, such as this horse here and this horse here, and that's before any tail was added to them. And the pictures are not the greatest, but here on this bluish kind of pad horse, you can see some tail has been added to him. Here, our horse with a light pad, some tail has been added, an extension has been added on that horse. Most of that is going to just give as a judge, I'm not judging the tail. It does, as I said before, create the overall illusion, the overall look of those horses, and does kind of complete the whole picture. Don't think that if you don't have extra tail, you know, because they are expensive, that you can't go out there and show your horse. You just want to make sure that the presentation and his turnout is as good as what you can make it. Okay, now to get into a couple of our classes, and I had some videos. They're not going to work as well as I'd like to, but we're just going to talk a little bit about some things with a couple of the classes that you kind of pick out and see from time to time. Showmanship is one class that does go through a lot of trends as far as how people go through and put the class together. And I'll mention a little bit on a person's posture, how they run, where their hands are held, and kind of the length of the chain. And these are some things that I've seen over the years of different trendy things come and go. And it certainly seems that whoever the winner is for a few shows, then that's who a lot of the other folks try to copy, and it may be it may be a good thing, it may not be. Sometimes from a judge, sometimes those trends are a little bit more of distractor, going like, I wonder if they knew, you know, why they were doing what they were doing and those types of things. So let me back up here just a second. Oops, let me try to back up. As far as the posture, I've seen folks, you know, go with very stiff and overly upright and very artificial. The bottom line with the person's posture is that you should just look natural. It should look simple and easy. I like to take my kids out when they're practicing showmanship and have them run without a horse, with their hands up in the proper position, and so they get used to running and moving around the arena in their boots without a horse. So it just gets very natural and relaxed, not overdone, not fake and phony. And the same thing with the run. I've seen folks run extremely fast. I've seen them take huge steps. I've seen them run, I want to say, with their rear out behind them. And so don't make it distracting. Just make it nice and natural. Yes, you do want to stand upright. You don't want to hunch way forward and some of those types of things. Because really sometimes those are more of a distraction and take away from their presentation than when you do some of those things that are a little bit more trendy and a little bit different. Okay, person's hands, this is a big thing. Okay, the lady over here, the young lady over here, her hands are excessively low, and one thing about her turnout is she does have gloves on. That's kind of a trendy thing that we really don't see gloves in showmanship. There's not a rule saying you can or cannot, but as far as kind of the expectations right now, a judge might say, I wonder why she's got gloves on, because that's something that I probably really would avoid. Also, if you can see her hands are very low, we don't want them pulling their horse's head down, and so this is going to be a very negative, a very big distraction, and they should be more upright, as this young lady is here, where they're up, fairly natural, kind of about the height of the horse's head. You don't want to really drag the horse's head excessively down or happen to lift it up, but they should be in a very natural, comfortable manner, and should have a little bit of bend in both your arms, the one on the shank, and also your free hand that's hanging, that is holding the extra line. Here's a couple other pictures of some folks with their hands. This is a young man executing a pivot, and again, see how his hands are up in this position. One thing I will say that when I'm judging is I will look to see the position of their hands, and I often put an arrow down saying hands that were way too low. And it is a deterrent, it is a negative type of thing. This young lady, her free hand is back a little bit, but the height of them is fine. And so that's a little bit of a style thing. So both of these individuals' hands really are pretty much okay. Now, another thing that we've seen over the years is the halter fit and also the use of the chain. A real trendy thing that was around for a bit is that the chain, instead of just lying comfortably underneath the horse's jaw, is to have it excessively loose with the drape in it. And that really is an incorrect use of the chain. It should not be tight, but it should be just lay underneath that horse's jaw. You should also have the chain attached on the far side, as it is here, run underneath the horse's jaw and out through the other side. Not very often do we see one that runs over the nose, and again, that's a little bit of a style thing, and I would really avoid running it over the horse's nose. You cannot have it in that horse's mouth. And so just nice and lightly underneath his jaw like this, not super tight, but having it just laying there because you don't want it to be excessively loose. Also, the fit of the halter, this one is fit on good, where it's not overly tight, but it fits up on the bridge of the horse's nose, nice and fitted underneath his jaw. And as this is, you can see this young lady, this horse with her halter here, it's excessively loose. It's way low down on his nose. Okay, so that's going to be a very poor, ill-fitting halter, and something that will lower your score in showmanship. As far as the presentation, when you're going to look to move from side to side from the horse, there will be different coaches and different individuals that will tell you to do it in 1 step, 2 steps, whatever it is. There is no rule that's going to say how many steps to take, but it should be just very comfortable. I would not take one huge step, but just something that is very natural and comfortable as you move from side to side on the horse. I always like to say too that your toes should stay pointed to that horse's shoulder, and your attention needs to be onto the horse and not just staring the judge down. So again, the big rule on showmanship is keep it smooth, keep it not overly artificial, not overly stiff, to give you, you know, for it to really to come off with the best presentation. Okay. Now moving on to horsemanship. Okay, some of the things that I'd like to mention a little bit on horsemanship are a little bit of the pace of the pattern, of the horsemanship pattern, a bit on hand positions, and also a bit on the rein length, because these are some different things that we do see from time to time. And again, it's another one of those classes that folks tend to watch what others are doing, and then go ahead and try to do what they think is going to you know, what the judge is wanting. And most of the time, if you get the best performance out of your horse and you're the most natural and relaxed rider, everything's going to come into play. So if you look at this one individual here, you know, they are set up on their horse very well. They've got a good hand position. This is a very appropriate rein length that they do have on this particular horse in this picture. Okay, so here's some difference of hand positions on some of these different individuals. Okay, so this young man, if we want the shoulders, we want the elbows in and the arms in next to their body, but not so tight or stiff that it looks like it's very artificial and overly stiff. And so both of his hands are up and even, okay, relatively even, kind of up and straight. It's not slung across his middle where it looks like he has a bellyache, and the elbows are very close and tight into his body. The shoulders remain nice and square, and if you move, you rotate from the waist. Yeah, his hand is turned over a little bit, but I think if you look at the place and picture this is, he's trying to get that horse to turn, and so that's a little bit of that, little bit of why his hand is turned just a bit, but we would not like the hand to roll over. Also, as we're looking at this from the front, okay, and just to bring out about the legs, you want the legs on the horse so they're being effective. And so this person does have his legs on a horse and driving it forward. So this young lady here, you can see that her rein arm is very straight and way down on her horse's neck. We'd like to see the height of her horn. We'd like to see a little bit bend in her elbow, a little bit higher, more up kind of where her horn is, okay? And that these two arms are a little bit more similar than one being excessively long or straight in the other. You can also see, if you look real close, that there is a gap here within her arm from her upper body. And if you look really close, you can see that her arms actually are a little bit, her shoulders are a little bit twisted. If she elevated this arm with a little bend in it, that would allow to keep her shoulders more square. Additionally, we like to see her legs just pressed onto her horse a little bit better, so she's driving and using those legs a little bit better. This young lady is kind of a combination of the two. To me, her hands are a little bit lower than what I'd like to see. She also has it next to her upper body, but she just has a little bit more of a stiffer kind of look to her than what the young man does over here. And you can see her shoulders are really not quite square. She's taking her hand over to turn her horse rather than using it with her body. And so just some very subtle kinds of things to notice about that the individual's hand positions as we're looking at them for horsemanship. Okay, another pet peeve of a lot of judges is the rein length in horsemanship, because horsemanship is supposed to go on light contact, so it shows how you're going to negotiate that horse through the pattern. All right, so this individual here on the bay horse, to me, is going to have excessively long reins for a horsemanship class. Okay, I'd like her to ride that horse in a little bit more contact, because when she asks this horse to go through different elements of the pattern, it's going to be very difficult to keep contact and cue that horse correctly and get him to respond correctly if the reins are excessively long like this. This individual, again, to me, she's got good rein length. She's got nice contact. And I'm not saying super tight with those reins, but just to where you have light contact with that horse's mouth. So very subtle changes and things that you do with your hands are going to go ahead and communicate directly with to that horse's mouth. So that is one of the things that you do see, and we do kind of have to comment or look for when we're doing a horsemanship class. So not to belittle the rein thing a little bit anymore, but here's a couple other still pictures also that this individual, if I was judging her in a horsemanship class, I would say her reins are a bit long and they are slightly uneven. If you look close on the young man over here, his reins are extremely uneven. This rein, you can see, comes way down here. This rein is quite a bit tighter. And so That would be a very negative thing for that individual in a horsemanship class, with it being, with his reins being very uneven. The attire, the turnout, yes, none of these are in our state 4-H attire, but no matter where you're showing horsemanship, it doesn't need to be overly flashy, and that a lot of, if you move into the breed show side of it, a lot like to have the solid type of outfits, and so it doesn't break you up. This young lady is a very nice seat and presentation, but with the white shirt and the chaps down below, or the red down below, it kind of breaks her lineup. Now granted, when we're showing 4-H, you don't have that option because you do have the white shirt and the blue jeans, but I would make sure that the blue jeans are long, okay, and well fitted, not excessively loose and baggy. Okay, something I'm going to back up here about, because I'm not going to play the videos, is not so much with attire, but a little bit on riding the patterns, is that another thing that we see often anymore is folks that do the patterns excessively slow. And it's not that we're out there asking you to run your horses, but they should be going with some forward motion, some forward momentum. Many patterns anymore have a combination of small, of fast and slow extensions and collections. And so we need to be able to see a difference of those. And to me, when I judge horsemanship, I want to see that the individual is using their legs, gathering their horse up, pushing them and driving them forward. And so a little bit more forward pace in most of your horsemanship classes is really what's going to be take your patterns to a higher degree of difficulty and go ahead and give you that higher score. Just to touch on the hunter under saddle a little bit, some of the same kinds of things that we see is a little bit of the rein length. I'll also give some comments as far as the horse's frame or their top line, looking at their headset and head carriage, and a little bit on their rail position, because that's been a trendy thing in the hunt seat classes that we've seen. Here's two horses with two different rein lengths, and granted, this one's not going down the rail, he's just standing at rest. But remember that that hunter under saddle is supposed to be going on light contact. And so the paint horse here on the bottom, I think you can see, really is going on light contact. His frame is just fine. When we talk about head set, that's how their nose is set in and out, and head carriage is how they carry their head up and down. And this horse does have a very good head set, a very correct head carriage, and his rein length is very appropriate. He's very soft in his reins and soft in his jaw. If this horse was going down the rail, couple of negative things is the reins would be excessively long. Granted, he's sitting here at rest, but this would be excessively long with the hunt seat reins. And for me, that would be a negative on that horse, just because they're supposed to go on light contact. A little bit on their frame and top line, and here's two still pictures of a couple of different horses. Kind of this class has also gone through a lot of criticisms of these horses getting tipped over too much and their nose behind the vertical. So on the solid bay horse over here, you can see that his nose really is bumped back, which is a negative thing, and his pole is down here a little bit below vertical, and the height of his head doesn't bother me as much as that his nose is behind the vertical, which will also restrict his movement to some degree. Okay, this horse has taken a really big stride. His reins are very appropriate as far as the length. I would say, however, though, he is tipped down just a little bit. I like that his nose is bumped out just a hair. And so I really, to be ideal, would like this horse's head just to bump up just a little bit, but his rein length is a little bit more appropriate. You can see the other solid bay horse over here is bumped back a little bit, and he's a little bit more restricted on the length, on how they're using the reins. This also is a very nice presentation. Yes, some might say his reins are a little bit long. This one is going to be very borderline, and I would say that we wouldn't want the rein length of this guy to be any longer. This is taken from a shot looking down, an angle looking down, and so I'm going to say that this horse's head carriage is fine, and his head set where his nose is, it's very fine. And I wouldn't want his rein length to be any longer than that, but for at that moment, I believe it is quite appropriate. Here's another one, another picture that I like. I love this horse's head set and head carriage. His nose is bumped out a little bit. Again, he's borderline on his rein length, okay? And I'd like her to collect him up just a tiny bit more, so he isn't getting some of that slack in his rein, but it's not excessive. It's just a little bit too much of what we like to see. Now our favorite deal as far as with Western Pleasure, and this is a class really that I know has had a lot of controversy over the last 15 years or so, and depending on the level of competition that you go to, many of these horses are just fine and doing a nice job. Oh, let me bump it back up 1 second, back to the hunt seat, which I didn't really address, is their placement on the rail. We've gone through a thing in the hunter under saddle classes where we want these horses more forward moving, and so some of the exhibitors have felt that if they pull them off the rail to the inside, it's going to give the illusion that those horses are moving at a faster pace. And we're looking for that length of stride, not necessarily that they're just going faster. And so I've been in some situations where the judges have actually told the exhibitors to put your horses on the rail, because it's become over extreme to them slipping very far off the rail. So that's something to think about when you're showing a hunt seat horse. To move him a few feet off the rail is just fine, but to be circling around the inside of the arena where you're just really running right around the judge, that's a little bit to the extreme. Okay, so in Western Pleasure, when we're looking at their speed and their pace, some other things to address is the passing issue, and again, where those horses' head is. You know, the speed and the pace has always been a big thing for our Western Pleasure horses, and when we judge it, most judges are mainly looking for what is the most correct moving horse, what is the most appropriate, who's doing it with the greatest degree of difficulty, and that they are doing the gaits correctly, okay, with the walk, trot, with the walk, jog, and lope, and not going too fast, not going too slow, and those types of things. So that's a little bit where the passing thing came into play, because some individuals would think, oh, I can't pass, and so I'm going to just stick behind, or some judges aren't going to award me if I do have to pass in a class. Well, anymore, really, we more or less look to try to find the best moving horses, knowing that a 16-hand horse is going to have a little bit bigger stride, so he's going to pass a horse that's smaller with a shorter stride. And so show your horses to the best of your ability, and the best to make your horse look the best, and don't worry about some of those other kinds of things. So on the headset and head carriage thing, here's a couple still pictures again of some things that really kind of try to avoid. I think it's very obvious on the paint horse here that that horse's head is excessively low, and he is behind the vertical, and something that we really want to avoid. Yes, he's in a snaffle bit, but he still should have his head more level. So if we look at from the withers to his poll and draw this line out here, his poll is excessively low. Also, his nose is back behind the vertical. Okay, so that's going to be a very negative thing, and something as a judge I'm not going to like very much at all. This individual here, he just looks a little bit strung out. You know, by rule, if we look, his head probably at this still picture is probably a little bit too low. If we draw the line straight out with the tip of his ears, he probably is a little bit too low. His head set with his noses is perfectly fine. So this horse, if he stayed like this, you know, he's going to be on that borderline. As an exhibitor, I'd like to just try to bump him up just a little bit, elevate his poll so it's a non-issue when you're being judged as far as where his head is. Now then you also have to remember about some differences of some breeds. Now this horse to me has a very good head set, very good head carriage. He's perpendicular with his nose, okay? He is going on a very soft rein. His head is very level. He's got a very good top line. So there's a lot of positives with this horse. This is an Arab type horse, and so if you judge a variety of different shows and things are out there and showing different kinds of horses, you have to understand that from different disciplines, different breeds, and that their presentation is going to be a little bit different. And these horses are going to have an arc to their head. They do not want them low. They do not want them behind the vertical. And so it's going to be just a little bit different look to them, but still many of the same basic criteria will apply to them as well. Here's another couple horses to me that are having a nice presentation, and we don't want to overdo the headset type of thing, but this guy's very natural. He's going on a very nice soft rein, one that the rider is very confident that he can get the job done with this horse. This young lady also, he looks like a very happy horse where his head is. The rein length is very appropriate. In Western Pleasure, it should be have a little bit of a looser rein. either of these guys in horsemanship, that's way too long, but for pleasure, it's very appropriate for both of them. Excuse me. A few other little bit things on some of the tack and attire. I think I also mentioned, you know, making sure that you are legal and that you kind of do dress and stuff to appropriate to where you might be and where you what you might be doing. I'm going to slip past this one. Here's some other pictures of a young man, and you can just kind of see that over here he looks a little bit like he's going to work. His jeans are too short. By 4-H rules, they're probably too light. They're pretty loose fitting, okay? Kind of has an okay saddle, but to me the saddle looks a little bit small for him. Kind of more of a working kind of pad. Also with the turnout of the horse, you can see his mane is long, okay? Does not have some extra tail on him. In today's still, the plaid shirts really are not, for an open show, breed show, they're kind of out of style. Not kind of what most of the time you're going to see anymore. This is the same individual, and you can see how his presentation is just quite a bit different. So they put the horse together where they did shorten and band his mane, put a little bit of tail in him, okay? Has just a different pad that's a little bit bigger, that you can see a little bit more. Change the saddle where it fits him just a little bit more. The dark jeans, kind of a more of a trendy kind of shirt. And so, you know, just dressed him up a bit. This is not a very expensive thing, you know, that you have to do, but something that if you're going to go bump it up from some of the other shows, something you might think about. I'm not going to judge you on your clothes, but trust me, if you walk in here like this, I'm like, oh, I better take a double look and make sure that I watch that one, and he could still disappoint me and not do very well. Whereas an individual like this can come in with a fabulous horse and still do just fine. But sometimes if you come in like this in a large class, you might get overlooked unless that horse is absolutely incredible. So give yourself and your horse the best chance. And if you think you're the winner, you better come in and try to look like the winner, okay? Here's a couple other things. You know, we've got a horse with a long mane, and that doesn't bother you at all. The horse looks to be maybe a little bit less broke with his kind of head up and that type of thing. With her jeans and that, her turnout, it's just fine. You know, different kind of style with a hat. But the minimum I try to do is maybe have, you know, a little bit nicer pad on this horse to turn him out just a little bit more. And this one's just put together just to a little bit higher degree. One thing that I would really encourage folks to look at and pay attention to and spend some time with is that you have a good hat. Years ago with one of my first horsing arounds, I had Lynn Palm come, and she really got on the hat thing because she says you can tell a horseman by the hat that they wear. And so it's something that can be very trendy. You don't have to spend a lot of money on a hat. You just need to make sure that you have it shaped quite well. Okay, this young lady here over here on this hat, it really isn't giving her any advantages. Okay, it's a very old style hat. It's very flat, and she can make her whole look appear to be more trendy and more with it, you might say, if we just would take this hat to someone and have them shape it up. Young lady here, she's got a very nice straw hat. It's very shapely. It looks very good, very sharp. A few other things with her turnout, you know, she's in our Nebraska 4-H attire. She's got a nice fitted shirt, and she has a very sharp kind of turnout put together with her. And so a very good overall appearance, staying within the confines of the rules for the class of the association, you know, that you'd be showing it. This individual here, okay, I'd like to shape her hat up just a little bit. The scarf around her neck, it's kind of long and flowing and really not. In horsemanship, we want to have kind of that very tailored look to it. So instead of a long scarf like this, it would be better if it was a scarf maybe tightened up right around her neck where it's not long and flowing. I'd also see, you can see her shirt is kind of loosely, you know, and not really tucked in. And so you'd really like to see her shirt tucked in a little bit better. From what I can see, the turnout of her horse is just fine. And we like to just fix her hat a little bit, get her shirt tucked in, some of those kinds of things, change her tie, and make her have just a little bit sharper appearance. So those are just a variety of things that I ran through kind of relatively quickly on some things that you might think about. And you know, appearance isn't everything, but you know, they always say you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And so you want to control the things that you can control, and then also make sure that you have your horse as broke as what he could, so you can do the best job with the horse. And I'm not going to say I'm going to judge somebody by their turnout, but it does make you sit back and take a second look. And sometimes the fanciest people do a terrible job, and so they're not going to be the winner. And sometimes those that kind of, you look at them twice and they're not as put together as what you might think, come in and do the very good job. You want to try to avoid some of the really big trends and the really big things that are kind of, that you'll see folks do, and be it in showmanship, horsemanship, pleasure, whatever it might be, that you go through and do the best job that you can and stick to your guns. Don't try to show to what you think the judge is going to like, but to what that you know is the best way to present your horse for whatever class it is that you might be showing in. So with that, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and type them in to the chat box, and I can try to answer anything here real quick. And other than that, I think we will call it a night.